Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. I have been seeing that students are not able to perform well on research methods in the AQA syllabus. There's a tendency in them to be overconfident, frankly. That's what I've seen. They feel research methods are very easy when they look at them. And then when they give their class tests and they get poor marks, then they realize that they haven't got conceptual clarity, first of all, in research methods. They haven't really understood the concepts. That is what they realize when they go to apply them in the paper. And they also realize that they don't know how to effectively write their answers. As far as conceptual clarity is concerned, I will try to make a video on that soon, explaining some of the research concepts to you. And what I'll do is, I can't cover everything today because today I'm just solving a past paper. But as and where relevant, before writing the answers, I'll just clarify the concept that is relevant to that question to you in this video. As far as writing answers is concerned, the most fundamental problem students have, why all of them are losing marks, is not contextualizing answers to the scenario given, writing very generic answers. So I will explain how you are to contextualize your answers as well. Normally for the AQA, I take a topical approach. So I'll take, say, one research method and practice many questions related to that. Today, I have taken a single past paper instead of taking topical questions. This is the June 23 paper for AQA Psychology International. Sorry, not International, the UK AQA Psychology, GC. I've taken from there. Nevertheless, it is very relevant to Oxford International AQA students as well. Research method questions are the same. I know one or two topics are different, but as far as this paper 2 section C is concerned, this is common to both the UK curriculum and the international IAL curriculum. So this lesson will help both types of students. Today I'm taking a single paper approach. Just want to give you a broad idea on how to contextualize your answers and concept clarity, how to have it. That's why I'm not focusing on one specific topic. Mine is more of, today it's an approach of how to increase your marks in research methods. Okay, as I always say in every video, one or two things, if you want, you can skip a little, but it's important for me to clarify for those students who are watching for the first time. Whatever answers I write here, I will upload on my website and I will link it in the description box and the pinned comment below so that you can download for later reference. Or I even recommend, as you're watching this video, keep the PDF of the answers in front of you so that you can pause once in a while and keep checking out the answers there so that you fully understand the lesson. Second, I strongly recommend, as you're watching this video, you solve the paper with me. Don't just watch passively, be active. Write your notes from what I'm saying. Mark your answers with me, write your answers with me. That active learning approach is always better. And third suggestion which I will give is, what I'll tell you about the video is, as I'm writing the answers, I will explain to you how to structure, how to organize. I will write sample answers, but my intention is not to get you to memorize the answers. There are no fixed answers, and research method scenarios will never be repeated on the paper. So there's no point of trying to memorize also. I want you to see how I structure the answers, what content I choose to cover, what wording I use, that is the terminology that I use, which I will tell you explicitly, how I meet the mark scheme requirements. I want you to focus on the how of this video, not the why, not the what. Your focus should be how is she writing the answers, not what is she writing. Then you will be able to score well on the paper. So having said that, let's begin with this paper today. And first, I will read out the scenario which is given. I want you to read with me very carefully. I will be highlighting some sections as I read. You can also do that on your paper or in your mind at least. Make sure you highlight. What I highlight when I'm reading is what is relevant to that research method. When I read the first sentence only, I can make out what the research method is. You can too. So once I come to know, say it's an experiment, then I keep on highlighting those features which I know will be very relevant to me in answering questions later. So if you've got your concepts clear and you've practiced a few questions before, like even the textbook questions, if you've practiced, It'll be easy for you while you're reading only, you'll be able to mark out those sections which you know you should understand carefully to be able to answer the following questions. My first advice to you comes right here. When you're answering the paper, make sure to read the question very carefully. Research method scenarios are long, but they are worth taking the time and reading carefully. If you don't read carefully, what happens is you start writing the answer in a haste, then you realize that, oh, I didn't read this part fully. Now I need to go back and read. When you go back and read, you realize, oh, what I've written is incorrect. Let me cancel that. Let me write something else. And you make a mess over there in the answer. So you waste a lot of time later if you don't take enough time to read the scenario before. So first read patiently, then only start writing the answers to avoid making mistakes. Okay, let's read the scenario together. A psychologist wanted to investigate whether exercise would affect stress levels in 15-year-olds. Previous research into the effects of exercise on stress in teenagers had shown that exercise decreased stress levels. The psychologist decided to use a repeated measures design to investigate the effects of exercise on stress levels in 20 15-year-old students. All the students were approaching their end of year exams. For condition A, students were required to complete a 2-kilometer run during their morning break time each school day for 1 week. In condition B, students continued their normal activities in the playground during their morning break time each school day for 1 week. At the end of each week of investigation for both condition A and condition B, each student was asked to rate their levels of stress on a rating scale of 1 to 10, where the higher the self-reported rating, the greater the stress levels. So as I was reading, what I was marking out was experimental features. The IV, DV I have marked. I hope you can identify them. I have marked the total number of participants, the experimental design, the dependent variable, how it is operationalized, standardization, what has been done across the conditions, and the manipulation which has been done, operationalization of the IV. So I hope you've been able to identify these elements as you were going along. If not, that means you need conceptual clarity. Your research methods are not clear. Broadly knowing what an experiment is not going to be helpful. Specifically knowing an experiment to that extent that you can realize its features in the passage given, that is when you know your concepts well, and only then can you score well in the paper. So I hope you've been able to identify the elements. Otherwise, time to go back to the drawing board and learn your research methods again before attempting any paper. Okay, let's look at the first question. As I have emphasized that you should read the scenario very carefully, every question also you must read very carefully before answering, because we have seen repeatedly instances in which something is boldened in the question, yet students ignore that and make the very mistake which the examiner, the person who set the paper, was trying to make sure that students don't make. So never ever answer in stress or in haste. The question is, which of the following types of hypothesis is not appropriate for the psychologist to use in their study? State one circle only. Okay, so like I have promised you, I will revise a bit of what is relevant before answering the question. So first let me revise the conceptual part, and then we will answer the question, because no doubt here we don't have to explain anything, but how do we decide which is the right one without having a reasoning in our own mind? The way of deciding which hypothesis is appropriate for a study is if previous research done in the area has been conclusive. Previous research has given us a definitive answer that this is the way one variable impacts another, or this is the type of relationship that one variable has with another. In that case, we can give a directional hypothesis because we have some basis in past research. Past research is telling us this, and therefore we are giving a directional or a specific hypothesis. In the case that previous research has been inconclusive, previous research has looked into the topic which the researcher is interested in, but it has failed to give up a definite result, or previous research has not been done. This is a very fresh and new topic in which no research has been done earlier. In that case, a non directional hypothesis is appropriate because we don't have a basis, no empirical basis on which we can say this is what we are expecting. And research is a scientific process. The researcher can't give an assumption from their mind that this will be what we will find. So, this is the basis of deciding. Now, we need to go back to the scenario. Having read it properly, we know the answer. But just to cross check and for me to be able to demonstrate to you in this video what I'm doing exactly, we will go back to the scenario. This researcher, first I need to ask myself, what is this researcher trying to prove? What is the aim of this study? This researcher wants to show that when it comes to teenagers, exercising will help them reduce their stress levels. Now, to decide which type of hypothesis they should be giving, we need to check what has previous research shown, something which they are telling us very directly. Previous research has definitively shown or specifically shown that exercise decreases stress levels in teenage. It has not been inconclusive. It's not said maybe it increases stress or maybe it decreases stress. Very for sure they have told us in past research it will decrease stress levels, which means that previous research has been conclusive, and the appropriate type of hypothesis is to give a directional hypothesis. But what are they asking me in the question? Which is not appropriate to be given. They are not asking me which is appropriate. I have to give the opposite one. So it wouldn't be appropriate to give a non-directional hypothesis because non-directional would be the case if research was inconclusive. In this case, it is conclusive. Now, what mistakes students will make? They'll get into the reasoning because conceptual clarity is not there. They'll struggle a lot. Finally, they'll realize, okay, decreases stress level means directional hypothesis should be. Then quickly they'll mark directional hypothesis, losing sight of the fact that they have asked us mark the one which is not appropriate. So when you're tensed, when you've not practiced enough, when you're not prepared enough, that is when you make these mistakes of marking the wrong answer. Then you say, oh, I knew the right answer after the paper, but I didn't read not appropriate. I thought appropriate because I was so stressed out and I marked it. That is the problem with answering in stress. And stress comes when you have not practiced or you're not prepared enough. So make sure you've prepared well so that calmly you can answer. And these easy marks which are to achieve, like is it a big deal getting 1 mark in this answer? No. You don't lose such easy marks when you answer well. So here all we have to do is mark the correct answer, which is non-directional hypothesis. That would not be appropriate. So just shade into that. As far as the other alternatives are concerned, just to quickly go through them, why they are not appropriate. As far as null hypothesis is concerned, it's always appropriate. So it's never going to be a not appropriate hypothesis. For statistical significance checking purposes, we always use null hypothesis. So it's never going to be an answer for this type of question. One-tailed hypothesis is the same as directional hypothesis, right? Non-directional is two-tailed. So one-tailed, directional, both are appropriate in this case. Non-directional is the one which is not appropriate. These type of questions are attributed only 1 mark and it's more or less an identify question, which means identifies the command term. And you have to give straightforward answers. You don't have to give any explanation. There's no space also that's allocated for explanation. Let's come to the next question. Next we have an explain question. Explain why a repeated measures design was more appropriate than an independent group's design in this study. There are multiple ways of answering this question. Now, a few tips before we answer. Whenever they're asking you for 2 designs or any 2 elements of research, they're asking you to contrast and say why this is better than that. It's understood. What is the strength of this which is not there in that? That's what they're asking you. So first what you have to think, I'm telling you what your thought process has to be. What I've learned in research repeated measures design, which strengths I have learned in general. Before contextualizing anything, think about generally what strengths we have learned of repeated measures design. One is participant variables are eliminated, which is the most prominent strength, the most important one, which contributes to increase in validity. Another is the sample size required is lesser, which is of practical convenience to researchers, because if they can get a smaller sample size, becomes easier for them to conduct the study. Right now, I would go for participant variables are eliminated or individual differences are eliminated, because that's the key strength. Now, many students do come to this point and they're able to say participant variables are less. But then what they write is participant variables are reduced. One sentence, next sentence increases validity. What about this study? They're asking you for this study. Are you contextualizing? Are you explaining with reference to this study which they have given? Which participant variables are getting eliminated? Then how do you expect marks? These are definitely AO2 questions. For research methods, generally I don't keep on highlighting AO2, like assessment objective 2 has to be met application, because it's understood. In research methods throughout you are doing AO2. No doubt AO3 is also embedded in this, because you are doing strengths and weaknesses. But isn't it all AO2? Why do you think they have given you such a big scenario at the beginning if they don't want you to make use of it? They could have asked you directly what's the strength of repeated measures design instead of independent measures design. Why give you such a big scenario for you to decide? So that is why you have to contextualize. There's no other way. They want to see your research method skills. They don't want to see how much you've memorized from the textbook. Do you remember that whole table in which strengths and weaknesses of experimental design is given? That's not what they want to measure. They want to measure what you've learned. Can you see in this scenario where it is and point it out? So that is the approach which you have to take. When they're asking you why repeated measures design is better, in general, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, participant variables are not there. In this scenario, what is the participant variable which is getting reduced? Again, because I am going to give you some conceptual clarity in this paper, let me explain to you how you have to think about participant variables. Whenever you have an experimental scenario, okay, let's go one step backward. How do you know this is an experimental scenario? Because some students will struggle with this also. There is clearly a cause-effect relationship which the researcher wants to see. Whenever the researcher believes something impacts something, something affects something, this is the cause of that. It is experiment. Here the researcher believes exercise is the cause for stress levels. Like if people exercise, that is a cause for less stress levels, and if people don't exercise, that is a stress for more stress levels. So it is an experiment. There is a clear cause effect. Now, one thing is actually in the beginning only we should do it before answering any question that they have given in an experiment. We should just think about what is the IV and DV, because it is going to be the foundation for answering almost every question which is there. Still, we haven't done it at the beginning, so let's do it now. To be able to identify participant variables, the first step is to know what is the IV and DV of the experiment. And very soon I will explain to you why. To identify the IV and DV in any research scenario, you need to ask yourself what has been manipulated by the researcher. That will be the IV. Now, what has been manipulated means what has been changed by the researcher for different conditions. In this case, it is exercise, because you can see some participants are asked to run 2 kilometers and some are asked not to run, in the sense do their normal activities. So exercise is what is varying or what has been deliberately changed by the researcher for the two groups. What is the dependent variable? What has the researcher measured? The researcher has measured stress levels. They have taken ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 for stress. So IV is exercise, DV is stress. If you're still finding it difficult to identify the IV and DV, it's a very basic which you have to know. You can think of, according to the researcher, dash has an impact on dash. For any experimental situation, just fill in this sentence which is there and you'll come to know what is the IV and DV. So according to this researcher, exercise has an effect on stress level. So this is the IV and this is the DV. Now, coming to the next step, we have come to know using any technique what the IV and DV is. We are trying to identify participant variables. When we have to identify participant variables, we have to think, besides this IV, keeping aside this IV, what else can influence the DV? Leaving this IV exercise, just pretend it is not there. What else can impact stress levels in a person? And because it is participant variable, something else that can influence stress level from within the participant. So my question has to be, what else can affect stress besides exercise from within participants? Now, in your ordinary life, when you see people around you, see them stressed. Why are they stressed out? Think of some reasons, or look at yourself. Why are you stressed out sometimes? Maybe you have a habit of overthinking, so it's not about exercising or not. You overthink so much that you get stressed out very easily. Maybe you have a lot of workload, or you see your parents or somebody, they have a lot of workload. That's why they are stressed out. Or people just have a nature. Some people have a worrying nature. They get stressed out because they can't help but worry about everything that's happening. They always think about how things can go bad in the future. So people's own thought processes, their personality, they can also cause stress. Exercise is not the only factor which determines stress. Just make sure that when you're thinking of a participant variable, you don't think of a situational variable. That's different. So if you say something like temperature could also affect stress levels, it's right. If there's a lot of heat, people do get stressed out. But that's not a participant variable. It's not inside them. Temperature is on the outside. It's a situational variable. Okay, so this is how we identify participant variables. This was just one demonstration. You should be able to do the same process for any similar scenario which comes. Now, why it was important to do this exercise? Because you have to give examples when you're writing the answer, then only it will be contextualized, otherwise it will be a generic answer. If I just say participant variables could have affected stress, but what is the example besides exercise? What? So when I give definitive type of examples, then only I can score. So now I'll write a sample answer. Your answer could be a little different. You could be talking about some other participant variables while answering. That's fine. But just get an idea of how to write. It's for 2 marks. So how I'm going to structure the answer is, first I will just say that these are the possible participant variables, and then I'll explain how they reduce validity. Because after all, I have to show why the repeated measures design is more appropriate. Because these participant variables are getting avoided by the use of a repeated measures. In independent measures design, they would have caused a difference between the two conditions. So I'll just write and then I'll discuss further. Participant variables like workload or overthinking could have created a difference between condition A and condition B by affecting stress levels if an independent groups design was used. Repeated measures design eliminated such variables increasing validity. So here I want you to focus on how I have entirely contextualized the answer. I have not given any general point. I have not just said difference between conditions or difference between groups. I have specified which conditions, I have specified which participant variables, not just in general participant variables would be there. How exactly they would affect also, I've not given a generic term like DV would be affected, behavior would be affected, stress levels would be affected. This is known as contextualizing, using wording from the scenario and the answers, relating what we are writing to the scenario given. It's the only way of getting full marks in the answers. Whenever students get half marks, like this, I've written such a long answer. I wrote 2 sentences, 3 sentences, but in 2 marks I got only 1 mark. This is the reason. This is the key reason. You haven't made it specific to the scenario given. You haven't applied your knowledge to the scenario. And EO2 is about application. So unless you write this way, using this highlighted terms which I've given, like specific terms, you're not going to score in the paper. I've given you the thought process also behind the answer. It has been lengthy, I know. That's why the paper is going slow. But my intention, like I told you, is the how, not what has to be written. So I hope you're understanding how to go about answering the questions. Also, you can see how I've met the command term requirements. It's explained. So I've given a reasoning. Also, whenever they tell us to contrast something, like compare this and that, why this is better than that or this is worse than that, you speak about both the things. Some students have a habit, they'll say repeated measures design eliminates participant variables, which is right. But what would be the problem? Why wouldn't independent measures design do that? They've asked you for both, right? They've asked you not absolute terms what is the benefit of repeated measures design. In comparison with independent, what is the benefit of repeated? That's what they're asking you. So you need to show this is a flaw in independent measures, mention that, which is not there in repeated measures. That's how you draw a comparison. So when it comes to explain and you're comparing something, show both sides. This would be a problem here, but not a problem here. And because it's explained, give full reasoning, contextualize reasoning. 2 marks are there, give 2 points. Like you don't just leave it at okay in independent measures this would not be there, would be then repeated measures it's not there. But what does it affect? It's like in the long answers also when we write peel answers. How we write peel answers? We elaborate, but then we explain why this is a strength or weakness. So always an explain why it is a strength or weakness needs to be made explicit because it is increasing validity. That's why it's a strength. That is also important to mention. Okay, let's look at the next question. To improve the validity of findings, the psychologists counterbalanced the students across the experimental conditions. Describe how psychologists could have counterbalanced the students across the experimental conditions. Okay, I'm coming a lot across counterbalancing answers across different curricula. So every video almost I'm explaining the same thing. When it comes to counterbalancing, very important is to read the question carefully and note, are they asking you why counterbalancing should have been done or how counterbalancing is done? In any topic that they're asking, how and why are two very different questions, but particularly important in counterbalancing because students tend to confuse a lot. The moment they see counterbalancing, they start explaining why it is beneficial because then order and practice and fatigue effects will get eliminated and that will increase validity. But they're not asking you for that. They're not asking you how validity would be increased. They're asking you the procedure, the process. How, step by step, what would the researcher do to make sure that counterbalancing is there? That is what they want to know. It's for 3 marks. They want you to describe, means you have to give it step by step. That's all. Very explicitly, word to word, again contextualized in this situation, how counterbalancing would be done. First, conceptual clarity. Counterbalancing means that we have to know firstly what are the two conditions of an experiment. Let's assume they are A and B. In this case also they are A and B, only they are denoted that way. In counterbalancing, it is repeated measures design, but we split participants into two groups, not to give them different treatments, but to give them the same treatments in different orders. So we divide participants into two groups, half and half. The first group has to do the serial order of conditions, that is A followed by B, and the next group has to do the reverse order of conditions, B followed by A. This is all we have to explain, because it is why it is done is something we don't deal with right now. So order effects should not come in the picture. Now this, how it will be done in this experiment, what students will do, I'll tell you what is going to be the mistake for this type of question. They're going to say, they'll tell me in this scenario they have said condition A, condition B. So I'm just going to say A should be done, then B for half the participants, B should be done, then A. That cannot be considered contextualizing. No doubt condition A, condition B is the wording used in the scenario, but it is not contextualizing. It's not making it specific. I have said this many times. I will explain this again. What is a generic answer and what is a contextualized answer? Generic answer is which you could give the same answer no matter what the scenario was. So if this scenario wasn't there, let's say some other scenario was there, you could have given exactly the same answer, A and B, then B and A. This is something you can write for anywhere. So no doubt that wording is there here. But you cannot give this answer because this you could have given anywhere and it will count as generic. Let's say we replace this whole situation with another situation from another paper. Still you can give this answer. You have to use wording from the scenario which is specific to this study, which will not be found in other studies, which is relevant to the aim of this study. So instead of saying condition A, you will have to say the exercise group or the 2-kilometer running group. And for instead of B, you will have to say the regular activities group or the group which is not exercising. That is how you have to make it specific. So when you're told something, like when the teacher tells you use wording from the scenario, don't try to, like, I don't know better way to put it, don't try to act smart and say, oh, but that wording was there in the scenario, and purposely give A and B. When you do things like these, like when you just try to win arguments with somebody, the loss is yours, your marks are going in the paper. The teacher has nothing to lose. Whenever you're being taught something, take benefit of that. Take it in the right spirit, because your marks will increase if you take it correctly. So understand the mechanism of how things are being done. Don't take things superficially in a way that I just want to prove my point. You're not here to prove a point. You're here to learn psychology, to understand the subject well, write your answers in a way you can score well, which will help you in your future ultimately. You want admission in a good university, and it's very competitive out there. So your whole approach should be a very humble approach when you're learning something. Acknowledge your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, learn from what the other person is telling you to make your future well. It will look like, in the larger scheme of things, it seems to be a very small thing that I need to get marks in psychology. But it's actually making a big difference in your future, which university you'll get admitted to, what you will learn in that university, what career you will make out of it, and your career takes most of your life. So don't have that type of a mindset which can really bring you down with respect to things which are so important in your future. Okay, so take things in the right spirit. Let's see how we can write counterbalancing answer. Okay. It is for 3 marks. As a rule of thumb, we try to cover 3 points. Not necessarily it has to be 3 sentences. So I'll write an answer and then I'll show you how it is marked also. The psychologist could, again I won't write anything generic, I will keep on referencing the scenario. Allocate 10 participants to one group. Why I have said 10 participants? Because they told us somewhere that the total sample size is 20. I had highlighted that. So instead of saying half and half, I'll say 10 and 10 to make it as specific to this scenario as possible. And the other 10 to a separate group. The first group will do the 2-kilometer running first in 1 week, followed by the normal activities in the second week. The other group will do these tasks in reverse order. At the end of each week, each group will rate its stress levels. Okay, so how we are scored for this is the essence of counterbalancing. How to do it is to divide participants half and half into two groups. So 1 mark for contextualizing and specifying in this scenario how they will be divided to two groups. Next is to say, like 1 mark will be what the first group is doing. So this is the activity, specific activity they're doing in the first week. This is the specific they're doing in the second week. Next is to say what the other group is doing. So 1 mark for that. The other group is doing the second activity in the first week and first in the second week. And then I have given this, though this is not very important for credit, but how the dependent variable is being uh, answered or measured in the weeks. Like I said, that's optional. You can leave it also. Counterbalancing, you're getting marks for saying half and half what the first group is doing and what the second group is doing. So even if you've not given exactly 3 sentences, like you can see for me, it's actually 2 sentences if I keep the last one aside. But you've made 3 points within those 2 sentences. Or say you've written 4, 5 sentences also to make the answer clear, it's fine. These 3 points need to be there, which I have mentioned, to get 3 marks. Okay, so that's how we write the counterbalancing answer. Let's come to the next one. The next question is, students self-reported their stress levels on a scale of 1 to 10. Explain how this might have affected the validity of the data collected. This is a 4 marks question. First things first, when they ask us how validity is affected, not necessarily they're asking us how it is reducing validity. They're not asking for a weakness per se. Affecting is a broad term which can refer to increasing or decreasing. So if you feel self-report can increase validity, you can make your whole answer about how self-report is good for validity. If you feel it does both increase and decrease, you can have a mix of both. If you feel it decreases, you can give both. You know that there are both strengths and weakness. So ideally what you should be doing is just, give the points which you feel you can contextualize and explain well. Just opt for those points. So again, I'll explain to you the thought process when you're answering, and then we'll get into the conceptual clarity part. First, in your mind, whenever this type of a question comes, think in general what you've learned about good and bad things of self report with respect to validity, not with other things. Don't think in terms of generalizability, reliability. Keep all that aside. Think only with respect to validity. When it comes to self report, if I talk about strengths in increasing validity, self report is the best method, as we know, to look into thoughts and feelings of an individual, because these are not directly observable, or there are too many errors that we can make, misinterpretations, when trying to directly observe them. So definitely it is the most valid way of looking into what is internal to the person, their thoughts and feelings. So that can be one point. In terms of another strength of self-report in validity, specifically nothing comes to my mind. If something comes to your mind, for sure you can take that also. Coming to weaknesses of validity in self-report, one we know is social desirability. Social desirability means that when it comes to self-report, people can distort their answers to give those answers which make them appear favorable, which makes them give an impression that they have socially acceptable traits. So that can reduce validity, because then they are not giving honest answers. Another issue when it comes to validity could be uh, memory issues, forgetting. When it comes to self-report, now depending on, not necessarily this will be applicable to every scenario, but if there's something they have to report from a little back in time, which is not immediate, so we are not asking them about thoughts or opinions which they are holding right now. they might forget some things which they have to report. So they won't be able to report very honestly. And another issue with validity can be some sort of hesitation of the researcher, some sort of a discomfort in speaking openly. Again, depends on the scenario. Is there something sensitive which is being asked? In that case, they might hide things or distort things because they're afraid of judgment from the researcher, like some sort of backlash or criticism that they might get. So these all are issues relating to validity in the sense they can reduce. How I will approach this answer is, like I said, we can take two strengths, two weaknesses, anything. Okay, again, why I'm saying two strengths or weaknesses, it's worth 4 marks. So generally in the shorter evaluation questions, one evaluation point is worth 2 marks. So the ideal approach is to take two evaluation points here, means give two explanations for how validity is reduced or increased. I will take one strength and one weakness to take a balanced perspective. One side I will show how validity is increasing, one I'll show how validity is decreasing. But you're free to structure your answer anyhow. In fact, when they don't specify as such that you have to give two strengths or weaknesses and they've allotted 4 marks, if your writing style is such that you can give detailed response, one strength or one weakness only you can elaborate for 4 marks, even that is perfectly acceptable. In fact, that is something which I have done in some of the past papers. You can refer to those. Right now I'm taking 2 points, one strength, one weakness, such that each is worth 2 marks. Now for conceptual clarity on the strength, which I'm going to take thoughts and feelings. If we look at this scenario which is given here, the researcher is measuring stress levels. Stress is a psychophysiological experience. So the psychological part of stress, which is there, that is, if a person is worrying inside or they're getting negative emotions, that is something that they can report best. So that's why it's a very good approach to ask them directly to report their stress levels, because mental stress that they are feeling is very hard to observe from the outside. So here the conceptual clarity I want you to have is that what is the thought or feeling which is best measured through self report. That's what we need to identify in this scenario. So always think of validity increasing in self report in this sense. As far as validity decreasing is concerned, here I would like to take the point of forgetting. Why I'm taking this one? Because participants are doing their exercise or normal activities over a week of time, and then we're asking them how much is their stress. No doubt we're asking them at the end point, but throughout the journey, if their stress has increased or decreased on some days, they might not forget, or in fact more than forgetting, they might not be able to report also properly, because they have to give result in one point in time. That time when the researcher is asking for the rating, they have to say how stressed they are feeling. So throughout the week, what they've been feeling, on some days more stress, some days less stress, that will not be reflected well on the rating which they are given. I know it's more of a problem of ratings more than self report, but ratings do come within self report. So that is also a justified point. Another point you could take over here is, which we had seen, of hesitation. If participants are hesitating in some way to report to the researcher that their stress level, say, has increased even after doing some activity which was recommended by the researcher, so they are afraid to say that their stress level has still increased, that's why they might give wrong answers. That is also possible. So now I'll write the answer. I want you to focus on, again, how I'm making it very specific to the scenario and not writing anything in general. Okay, so one is validity could be increased as participants' stress levels are internally experienced by them Okay, I'm so sorry to end the video abruptly, but I really have to rush out. I hope you understood the answer that I intended to write. I'll write it completely and upload on the document. So in the document, you'll find the full answer. I've just got delayed, so I'll have to leave. And I'll try to continue this paper on some other video. Thank you for watching this video. Goodbye.